Okay, welcome back. It is late November 1869, and it's been a little while since the last video. It's been in a relative sort of a way, a busy week and a half or so. So I've not had much time to kind of sit down and actually play through many sort of, or any turns, but I have given the game a bit of thought and consideration. It's a funny situation because we kind of left off on familiar ground. I mean, this is not the first time that we've taken Vienna in this campaign. I remember when it first happened, thinking, my God, I can't believe what a feat. I can't believe we managed to achieve this. This is the third or fourth time. And in more ways than one, this situation has the furniture of home about it, which is to say that we've not just taken Vienna, but we're in a bit of a dicey spot. And the problem is with these kind of situations, it's only so many times you roll the dice and get a 6. The hope is that we can kind of hold this position, keep a kind of stake in the heart of the Austrians and twist it if need be, and to really consolidate this position, because it is precarious. The Austrians have assembled large forces. They've got a significant force in Prague. That's easily 100,000 men. And the force they have on the kind of west bank of the Danube in Hungary is probably a couple of 100,000. They've got a large force assembled around Vienna, and the First Army under Mehmed Ali is pretty vulnerable there. He doesn't have clear lines of communication or supply. His force carries a fairly limited amount of supply. I mean, most of his supply wagons are empty, and not for the first time we've taken Vienna with very little supplies in the city. So in the next fortnight, we need to pull something pretty quickly out of the bag or get him out of there, if the option, if there's an option to do that in a fortnight's time. So in terms of Army Group West and the 3 commands we have, I think I've kind of sat here for a really long time looking at this before kind of beginning this recording and looking at the options. The only option really is to try and conduct an offensive into Western Hungary. This is, this is absolutely not clear cut whether this is going to come off. It's going to be the 5th Army that's going to have to kind of do the donkey work, really. They're going to have to march north from Slavonian, across the Drava, set to an assault posture, all-out attack. And the problem with all-out attack, I've kind of mentioned this in the 1850s, I think it was in the Second War with Austria, is it's high-stakes play, because it means that you're going to have higher casualties on all sides. If it is a victory, it can be much more sensational. If it is a defeat, if the commander doesn't exercise sound judgment, you can end up looking at the annihilation of an entire command. You could look at catastrophic casualties. He will receive support from the First Army in Vienna, but it's not clear what condition that army is going to be in 6 days' time. It's going to take Ahmed Pasha 6 days to really make contact, and bear in mind that there's also a delay period. He may make contact in 6 days. He may arrive late on the 6th day. There may be action until the 7th or 8th day. There's a delay effect, and in that time, there's a pretty good chance the Austrians would have made a push towards Vienna. So whilst his force does provide support, that might not even be the best thing. We are going to set Mehmed Ali to a defensive posture. We are going to play at high stakes. If we can secure the west bank of the Danube, and the Austrians don't move into Slavonian, because Slavonian is completely open, that does open up clear lines of communication to Vienna in the short term. But it does require a lot of stars to align, and the gods have favoured us in the past. They won't always, sort of thing. To sort of add to this, Hussein Avni's Second Army, having secured Trieste, is a little bit out of the way, and weather now across the Balkans is torrential rain all around, with snow in the Alps. It's only really northern Italy, the flatlands of northern Italy, where the weather's still relatively kind of clement. So any movement is going to incur significant disorganization, and is going to take a long time. Now, Hussein Avni is not in a position to march north, really, to secure, at least not in one fell swoop. I think we are going to have to move into Crane, if only as a holding force. Now, the Austrian army in Crane can't move into Croatia. I don't think whether the area in Croatia is partially controlled by us. I'm not sure if they give them carte blanche or not, but they could, of course, move down to Fiume and begin to conduct their own operations along the Dalmatian coastline. At the very least, we want to pin that force. There are still Austrian forces in the district, I think. I'm trying to ascertain, yeah. So there's still a large Austrian force comprised of, 3 or 4 army corps. outside the city at Trieste, so there's going to be an action at Trieste straight away anyway. We're going to set him to an assault posture, and he's going to move north to Laibach. Now, that would entail two significant engagements. The first one, engaging the Austrian command in Trieste district, and then further action at Laibach against the Austrians there. And he's not supported, but his force is in a fairly good condition. He's got an Imperial Guard Corps under the command of Mehmed Izzet, a Lieutenant General, and he's a pretty experienced commander. He's got good offensive stats now. You know, we are going to really have to rely on his experience here, because probably a garden variety commander wouldn't pull this off, and it wouldn't necessarily be a hideous defeat, but this would at least position him. This should clear Trieste and position him not that far south from Vienna. And if the Western Hungary operation doesn't come off, and his force is in reasonable shape, which it might well be, these Austrian forces don't appear to have commanders. He says this one might. We can't see the commander, but we can't see a command penalty, which means that that force has all the hallmarks of a commander without us seeing who it is. Keep in mind that it's always the case that some forces can be concealed. This is a rough estimate of what their forces are. The intelligence we have in Trieste district, anyway, we have the city, is that this is a command that has a 20% command penalty. That's a standard command penalty for a large enough force that doesn't have a commander. So this should be, and also this force might be set to just fall back. Depends what its posture is. So this might end up being a milk run to secure Laibach. And if his force is in reasonable shape, come kind of early December, if the Western Hungary operation doesn't come off, then at the very least he might be then looking to, he could move it to Steinmark or Graz. Probably Steinmark would be the better bet, but that would still secure lines of communication. We'll see what the situation is in early December. If this ends up getting really, really messy, we might have to set Mehmed Ali to kind of evade combat if he's activated, and we're assuming he will be, of course. But we'll set him to evade combat to try and get him back, probably into a safe area like Croatia. But it's a dicey moment for Army Group kind of West. We'll see what happens. But we're going to get Hussein Avni's second army. We're going to conduct an assault on Laibach, and the 5th Army under Ahmed Pasha. We're going to conduct an assault on sort of the west bank of the Danube, West Budapest. Another point is Hussein Avni is not supported in this position. Again, he's kind of he's on his Todd, so we'll see what happens. Army Group East, the situation is much calmer. There are large Austrian forces in Russian territory. We also have access rights to Russia. We have had since the Crimean War. I don't know whether that means we can actually engage Austrian forces in Russian territory, but in any case, the 6th Army and Ahmed Mukhtar, he's not activated. We're going to keep him in place for the time being. And I think what we're going to look to do with Army Group East is to kind of split it into 2 sub-commands. So we're going to keep Bezid Pasha for the time being. Basically, the 4th and 6th armies are going to be held in place in the Carpathians as a screen to the large Austrian forces, a portion of which is in Russian territory. The other 2 commands, so the 7th Army is not completely at full strength yet, but it will be very soon, and we're going to deal with that. But the rear area at Kronstadt is secure, so we're going to send the 3rd Army at Abdelkarim Nadir onto to assault. His command is also in good shape. We're going to look to conduct an assault at Hermannstadt. It's not fortified. There are Austrian forces there. They are not substantial. They're mounted partisans, quite cool unit plates, mountaineers, skirmishers. A very small scouting force. They're inside the town, and if they're still inside the town, they could be destroyed unless they're able to basically fall back, get out of the town. So we're going to conduct an assault and secure central Transylvania. Now, what we're going to look to do with these 2 commands, so the 3rd and the 7th Army, is we're going to look to conduct an offensive into Eastern Hungary. The gateway to Eastern Hungary is going to be really the mountainous part. It's going to be Hermannstadt, and then securing Banat. Ultimately conducting an assault on the fortress at Banat. And then after that, crossing the Koros and securing really the east bank of the Danube. If we can get these 2 commands into central Hungary, and the situation doesn't go really badly wrong with Army Group West, this should provide a bit of kind of this should stabilise the situation with Army Group West. It allows us to kind of allows further lines of communication to open up, and also allows us to bring forces to bear in the center. So, you know, it's going to take time. It's going to take a month to 6 weeks to realistically, and that's on the basis that nothing goes horribly wrong for us to be able to do that. But it means that long term, if we can play a little bit of a balancing act here, sort of, you know, shifting weight from foot to foot, keeping our position in Vienna, keep in mind that the longer our position, the longer we hold this position, the worse the general situation is for the Austrians in terms of their morale, the combat effectiveness of their units, and so on. So, in the short term, to begin this, we're going to look to secure Hermannstadt. The Ati Pasha of the 7th Army is at partial strength. It's still only 12,000 men. So, to that end, we are now going to bring up our reserves. So we have an additional guard corps, which has been constructed in Constantinople. That is just complete. It's just been completed in terms of its training and sort of unit of fabrication, if you like. We're going to put them on rails, and we're going to bring that force 13 days. Now, keep in mind it's 3 days to Plevna, so a lot of that is crossing the Danube. But that's good. That's within the next fortnight. It's a shame it just takes that long, because it means we don't quite know what condition it's going to be in when it arrives. In addition, we have another cavalry division in Sinop, which is also completed. We use railroads. Yeah, we use railroads for this force also. 15 days. That's good. Again, that's still... We could even use riverine points. Riverine points doesn't shave any time off. Okay. So that brings in a cavalry division, a guard corps, and that will combine then with a cavalry division and 3 specialized mounted infantry divisions. That should bring that force up to a fairly considerable strength. I mean, the guard corps is going to be 30,000, so it's 50, 60, 70, 80, plus I think infantry or cavalry divisions are like what? And they're not 700 men per element. I don't know, I think it's like 7,000 men. They're smaller than infantry divisions, but we should have enough command points for that. If we don't, we can jettison a portion of that force or leave it behind. But the idea is that should position us to really conduct an assault on Banat. Mountainous terrain, that's good. That suits the specialization of some of the forces. Banat doesn't look like it's very well defended. We've taken Banat before. That's the good thing. We've taken all these fortresses before. We know they're not modern fortresses. And the Austrians, of course, have been fairly threadbare for the last 10 years. So the kind of things that they would have done if we hadn't have destroyed their industry is they would have modified all these fortresses. They would have upgraded them, and they'd be much harder to take. As it is, that's not the case. So that's pretty much our moves. That's our moves in terms of the conflict in the Balkans. And it's kind of fingers tightly crossed, really, for the holding Vienna. I don't think there's any more we can do. Just double check the posture of our forces. Assault at all costs. It's going to be a white-knuckle ride, this, I think, for the next kind of the next 2 to 4 weeks for Army Group West. But we've managed to put it off before. One thing we're going for us, we've got a modern army, very experienced officers, pretty much technological parity. And a strong and rich tradition of giving the Austrians a hiding in the field. So let's hope we can pull that out of the bag again. In terms of anything else, there's nothing else to report, really. One thing that I am going to do is we've now secured the interior of Eritrea. So we're going to begin to try and lift up colonial penetrations in Asmar and Aswa. To that end, we'll start off with a bribing... I thought we would have been able to conduct a bribing operation. Why not? Okay. Well, we have no colonial penetration at all here as yet. What's the kind of criterion? That's interesting. I never realised that augments loyalty by 5%. Must be under colony status. I must already have a penetration of between 5 and 15. We're going to have to wait for colonial merchants then. I think that's the only colonial merchants and missions, I think, are the only things that you can play on something that has 0 colonial penetration. So that's our kind of gateway, really. The hope is, of course, is that we don't provide security for, you know, Piedmont Sardinian kind of sort of business there. We'll keep an eye on that. But yeah, there's nothing else to do there really. I think I mentioned in the last video, it's not clear. I think the Hedges is going to be a much longer game, and is going to somehow require for us to sort of explore the hinterland of the Arabian Peninsula. So this is going to be locked in protectorate status. It means that the next development really is going to be Somalia and Somaliland in terms of lifting these regions from protectorate and then ultimately colonial status. So our main focus now is going to really have to be Eritrea, Somaliland, Somalia. One thing of interest is for the first time we're seeing the British play colonial cards outside India. That suggests that they've probably largely secured India now, I think. I mean, they had a bit of an upset in India, of course, with the kind of mutiny. Well, they call it a mutiny, but most of these areas now, I think, let's have a look. Full colonial status. Some of them are protectorate. I'm not sure if some of them remain protectorates. I mean, I suppose the princely states were protectorates, but it looks like security-wise, India's fairly consolidated. They're still playing a lot of cards, they're laying railroads, but their next focus is going to be Burma, and I suppose increasingly in the 1870s, more and more powers are going to start looking at Africa. I mean, the scramble of Africa only really begins in earnest in the 1890s, but bridgeheads will be formed, I suspect, during this period. So we want to try and get into Somaliland fairly quick. You know, of course, the Italians have an interest in Somaliland. This is an area of real overlapping interest, so the Italians could, they could get a protector in Somaliland, but if we could do that, that'd be great. It's not a wealthy area, but it may be an area that yields something late game in terms of prospecting. There's a bit of access to cotton, so there might be kind of, resources there that could be prospected, and also there's a bit of prestige for getting it. I think the idea, if we can secure the Horn of Africa, for the most part, maybe not Djibouti, because I think France does have a real interest in Djibouti, and that might be rocking the boat a bit too much. But if we can secure the Horn of Africa, that'd be a real feat, I think. An ahistorical feat, but one that could really kind of pay dividends. In terms of the economy, we're still very much in the midst of an economic boom, both export-driven, but also climbing domestic demand. We had a bit of a recession in the kind of 1850s, the late 1850s. It was a worldwide economic crisis. It didn't affect us that badly. It was quite a shallow crisis, very transient. It lasted for about 6 months to a year, and it took a bit of time to recover from that. I mean, there was economic growth, but it was sluggish. It's really, really kind of this is a period of real profound industrial-driven boom. We're very much down the midst of the Industrial Revolution, and we're rapidly kind of making pace. We're catching up with countries like France and Prussia and the UK and sort of the United States and these modern industrial societies. Even though we're still very backward in terms of our institutions, we are kind of playing catch up, and we are, our economy is rapidly growing. We've got a lot of gold bullion sitting in the kind of sitting in the state exchequer, which is really good. We're keeping an eye on that. We don't want to sort of spend that too quickly. We're sort of outlaying a huge amount every fortnight for research and development, but we're still kind of we're still balanced positive here, so we're not eating into that. So that speaks to the amount of money the state is making now, and a lot of that is just based on taxation of transactions. The bigger our economy becomes, the more goods that are imported, exports, the more goods that we export, the more goods we sell in the domestic market through our various kind of taxation sliders. We make money, and then we have the kind of quarterly tax collections and this sort of thing. We're making enough to cover a lot of outgoings now, which is good. So we'll keep an eye on that, but the economy's trundling along nicely, and there's nothing else to report this turn. It really is all eyes are on Austria, really. I mean, we're kind of ending this decade with a bit of a bang. This is a war, of course, that we begun, and the Austrians have offered us a peace. It's not one that we're going to kind of consider. It's a very mild peace. We still have the options set, so that we have fairly significant territorial claims on the Austrians, which means that now that we control Vienna, there's a good chance they might offer us a peace that we'd accept. If not, at the end of December, we'll get a kind of our annual or biannual kind of intake of diplomats, and we could expend some diplomats to make some offers to the Austrians. So there's a chance the war may end in the next 6 weeks. It might end between the end of the year if the Austrians offer us something. And I think we're going to push harsher terms. Bucharest, I think the Dalmatian coastline. I think we'll look at 2 or 3 territories. We got Montenegro before. And those territories, again, they might just be collateral that we can use later on if we get in a difficult situation. That kind of, you know, we buy the Austrians off. It's territory that was theirs anyway in the beginning of the campaign. So anyway, it's late November. Moves have been made. Economic administration has been set. I'm going to check it again real quick. Assets balance looks sound. Quickly scroll through, make sure everything has a round figure. Yeah, that's all good. So I'm going to put you on pause. Past turn. It's late November. We'll see you on the other side in early December. Okay, welcome back. It is early December and lively round. Let's have a look at the reports. So the first action then is in Trieste. You remember that Hussein Avni was earmarked to move from Trieste to Laibach, but there were Austrian troops in the district around Trieste city. He engages that force. It's a significant force. It's sort of 88,000. A large part of that force is comprised of irregulars, about 11 regiments of irregulars. It's a victory. It's a fairly comfortable victory. He inflicts 37,000 casualties. The really crucial thing here is the number of HQ units destroyed. This suggests a lot of this force is comprised of understrength army corps, and this is the kind of officer really element, the kind of command elements that are being destroyed. That's really good. Plus 4 elements of field artillery, which is half of the artillery. It's over 100 guns destroyed. Most of those are range also, and then the assault casualties is one regiment of light infantry. That's good. 36,000, 37,000, 7,000 of which are prisoners, and he only loses 11,000. Comfortable victory then. Second engagement is when Ahmed Pasha arrives in Western Hungary, and it's a big action. It's a long, grisly battle as well. It is a victory. It is not a cheap victory. He inflicts 85,000 casualties, destroys them, and lays waste to a whole host of elements. 12 regular, 12 line infantry regiments are destroyed, plus a fortress garrison force, and then at range, he destroys, three field artillery regiments, a line regiment, and then a corps HQ. So it's a good action. It's not cheap though. I mean, of that force, 25,000 are prisoners, or 26,000 just under, but he loses just under 50,000 men. Those casualties are, for the most part, concentrated into his command, even though he receives support from Mehmed Ali of Vienna. What I noticed is, as the reports were coming through, when the battle kind of played through live, is that because of the kind of weather and the quagmire, Mehmed Ali was not able to provide support to the 4th round. It's a long and grisly action. It goes on for 6 rounds. So he was kind of looking like he could lose the battle, and then Mehmed Ali really kind of turns the table at the last hour. But yeah, it's a long, grisly and costly fight, but it does the job. It ultimately clears him. There are still large Austrian forces there, understrength forces, but he secures the city of West Budapest. Third action then is, it's a continuation of the same battle, but these are small actions really. These are kind of mopping up. There's still large Austrian forces there, but Austrian forces at this point, they're kind of pulling back. He only inflicts 3,000 casualties, takes 6,400 prisoners, no casualties at all, so it's mostly kind of shelling. It's ranged action. Next engagement is, it's in the same location, so yeah, West Budapest, ranged action. He destroys 2 elements of 2 field regiments of Austrian artillery. That leaves the Austrians, I think, with no remaining independent artillery regiments. And again, there's only 300 men, and he takes some prisoners also. But yeah, these are kind of skirmishing fights, ranged shelling, artillery duels, this kind of thing. So he's kind of consolidating his hold on the west bank of the Danube. Now, Hussein Avni, having cleared Trieste, now moves into Laibach and engages a large mixed Austrian force. Still no commanders. It looks like the commanders are in Italy. They're being brought back, though. This is a defeat. It's the kind of defeat that you definitely want. We inflict more casualties, we destroy elements, we don't take catastrophic losses. He takes 16,000 casualties, but that is all concentrated into his command. And his force is smaller than the Austrian forces there. We do have a firepower advantage with guns, but he loses 2 regiments field artillery. I'm not sure if they're independent artillery or whether they are kind of integrated into the corps. Some of these army corps, or most of the army corps, will have. Okay, yeah. So it's the artillery from this army corps. So it is a defeat, and it's a defeat that, you know, like, wasn't necessarily expected. His force was in good enough shape that it was expected that he might carry the day. We lose a national morale point for that. But again, in terms of material loss, it's not, you know, we can look the other way there. It's nothing. It's a long action. But these actions are kind of being conducted in difficult weather. Troops aren't moving very quickly. You know, it's messy stuff. But he holds his position. He doesn't break contact. He's kind of defeated in the field, but he holds his position in Laibach. So we chalk that up as a defeat. Abdelkrim Nadir then secures Hermannstadt very, very easily, destroys all Austrian forces there. It's just a paltry garrison plus the mounted partisans that hold their position inside the town. That means he can seal the town off and systematically destroy them. It looks that, like, most of this force was prisoners. They just surrendered. That's good. That's kind of these forces are now in staging areas for a meaningful offensive out of Transylvania into kind of eastern Hungary. The last action then, now we lose a national morale point, but we gain a national morale point back, and this is the continued action in Laibach. So Hussein Avni, having initially been defeated, inflicts heavier casualties on the Austrians, then engages them again. This is fairly close, although Austrian forces, I mean, this looks to be a slightly understrength cavalry division with 4 elements as a light cavalry division, 4 elements of light cavalry, an element of horse artillery. He takes similar kind of casualties, but it looks like a large part of this force is maybe enveloped, trapped, and compelled to surrender. It's a slightly shorter action, but it suggests that he is getting the upper hand. So he loses a national morale point, kind of gets it back, but that's both of these actions are not completely conclusive. Ahmed Pasha sustains heavy losses. I mean, nearly half of his command is casualties. There'll be some trickle back. We've got a kind of field hospital kind of unit, so there'll be some trickle back over the coming fortnight. Plus, we'll be able to push up reserves, so long as Austrians don't sort of move into secure Slavonian. He secures enough of West Budapest that he staves off kind of any kind of supply emergency in Vienna. It looks like we get in just about enough supplies to meet consumption, and a small amount trickles even into the city in Vienna. So, you know, it's kind of good enough for now. It's whether we can hold this position. Austrian forces are worse for wear. They're under strength. They still have a greater raw combat power than we do, and they have other forces that they can kind of bring into the area. They have railroad access, so they can quickly deploy forces and cross the Danube, maybe using forces that we can't see, that are concealed in the kind of fog of war up here. So it's going to be a case that we're going to have to just continue to press the offensive. We don't need to assault because we hold the structure. We will continue to all-out attack. We're going to continue to defend in Vienna. We do capture a supply unit in Laibach, so we'll integrate that into Hussein Avni's command. I think Hussein Avni, it is a different story. I think that his situation is more perilous. Even though he hasn't sustained as many casualties, one of his army corps is, I mean, it's lost all of its kind of integrated artillery support from ranged action. I mean, the second, in terms of raw combat power, the second most combat-worthy unit is the cavalry division that has more raw combat power than 2 of the army corps. That is not a good sign. That means that these army corps, you know, bear in mind that a cavalry division is like 7,000 men. These army corps, from strength, are 30-odd thousand each. 25 to 30,000 each, so we're going to have to get him out of there. I think we're going to have to get him out of Dodge. That does leave the left momentarily exposed. If there's one thing we're going for, is they can't pass through Zagreb, and they're going to have to besiege Trieste unless they conduct an assault immediately. We can see Austrian commanders now beginning to kind of move up out of the Italian peninsula. They're besieging Napoli. My thinking is that Naples, for the time being, is the Italian capital. There might be a scripted event that moves the Italian capital to Rome, because it was a significant kind of event in Italian history, and the Risorgimento, it has some political ramifications with it, as you can imagine, with the papacy. So I think that Napoli might be the kind of provisional Italian capital, which means if that falls, it's kind of game over really for Italy, the Italian campaign. I mean, it looks pretty bad anyway. I don't know what the state of Italian forces are. I mean, from the areas that we can see, we can't see any Italian field command, so their army might have been destroyed wholesale, and it might have become trapped. Bear in mind, they probably only had a field command of a couple 100,000 men, and it only requires these armies to become trapped in a city, the city to be assaulted, and for that force to be completely decimated. So that may have happened with the Italians, which means that even if Austria only maintains a very small force in the Italian peninsula, they can still continue to defeat Italy, which doesn't bode well. It means that we could be looking at peace in the Italian peninsula soon, and a peace which is favourable to Austria, so keep that in mind. Back to Hussein Avni. He's in Laibach. He could theoretically slip back, I think, into Croatia, and I think that's what we're going to do. We're going to try and get into full back in good order. Defensive posture, retreat if engaged. He's activated, which means we can get into evade combat, and we're going to try and slip back, I think. 10 days. That'll do, sort of thing. We might try and get into even enter Croatia once he's there. Croatia has supplies, which we should be able to draw on. We have supply rights, so it does leave the left momentarily exposed. But I think, I'd rather that than to have Hussein Avni's command completely decimated. At least in this position, we can bring up supplies. We know good railroad access into Bosnia-Herzegovina all the way up into Croatia. And that leaves him better placed also, come kind of January, late December, January, to support the west bank of the Danube, to support our position in Hungary, which is going to be the main thing, is we need lines of communication, and furthermore for him to counter any move in Slavonian. So, I mean, we can't ignore this Austrian force forever. This Austrian force is going to factor eventually, but it might be better if that force moves north and tries to retake Vienna and is continuously defeated there, whilst we focus on securing the kind of lines of communication to Vienna. Army Group East. Then, there's only one engagement, of course, that's in Hermannstadt, and that's kind of easy money. We bring up the Guard Corps then, that is now integrated into Avdi Pasha's 7th Army. We now have a Guard Corps, 3 mounted infantry divisions, 2 cavalry divisions, and 5 independent artillery regiments. One of them is a little bit antiquated, but we can live with that, and military provost and supply. This force is now large enough, 81,000 men, that we can use this as an independent command, not merely as a supporting role. Avdi Pasha is activated, we want to move on Banat, the time is now, sort of thing. Weather has cleared up a little bit. We were looking at kind of torrential rain, he says, going to the weather map, and it being no different from last term. For some reason I got the impression the weather had cleared. No, it's basically still rain and snow in the Alps. Okay, it's exactly the same as it was, so it's improved slightly in northern Italy, but it's very much in sort of autumn and winter weather. Okay, fine. In any case, this is mountainous terrain. It's a part of the kind of Carpathians. Avdi Pasha's command of any is best suited to deal with that. There are no Austrian forces there. The fortress will generate a generic garrison, and Avdi Pasha will conduct an assault and do so at all costs. If he's engaged, if the Austrians are making a counter, he's supported on the right by the 3rd Army that can march to the sound of the guns if need be. The centre's secure. Now, the 6th Army isn't activated. I think we're going to just hold for the time being in the centre. Abdulkarim Nadir's forces in okay shape, but it could do with sitting tight. Bayezid Pasha's forces in good shape, but I want to keep him here to support our position in Moldavia, because there are large Austrian forces. Yeah, there are large Austrian forces that can be brought to bear here. When the 6th Army is activated, we might look then to conduct an offensive. We might even try and sortie into Austrian-held territory. If they're going to host Austrian forces, and we also have transit rights, then we will look to kind of engage Austrians in Russian territory, and then look to move north and conduct an offensive. These two commands will be looked to really secure kind of the right flank, but then ultimately to conduct an offensive into the into the Carpathians, north into really the Austrian-held kind of Ukraine and sort of Poland, and clear the area, this kind of flat land, Tarnopol, Lemberg, Bukovina, and yeah, to secure this position themselves really in kind of Slovakia, with the centre force conducting an offensive from Transylvania into kind of eastern Hungary. That's the kind of plan anyway. So goes the plan. So Army Group Eastern, the only action is going to be looking to conduct an assault on Banat. In the west, yeah, hold tight in western Hungary, hold tight on defensive posture in Vienna, see if we can slip out of kind of lie back, get into Croatia, and preserve our force, you know, force preservation, and begin to get some replacements and supplies up and this kind of thing. That's pretty much it. In terms of actions, there's nothing else to report. I'm going to play a couple of colonial cards and look at some economic development. What we are going to do now is look at try and get some colonial penetration in the kind of hinterland of Eritrea. So we're going to we have got a colonial merchant. We'll send colonial merchants to Asmara. Now we have no colonial penetration in either of these regions, so it's going to take a bit of time before we can then lay down a trade post. That's colonial penetration 26 here. We should be in a position soon to move for kind of protectorate status for Somalia. We're at 35 in Berbera, 35 here. There's nothing more that we can squeeze out of that really. Italians are playing colonial merchants. I think in Harar we already have both a trade post and a mission. That's good. We do. Hebron suddenly it's 42. France is 35. I think if we're going to play a pacification card, the place to do it is probably going to be Massawa. We're at 40% there, but this is the colonial capital for Eritrea, and this is a bit of a focus. Good chance he won't come off, of course. It's 50-50, but we'll play that there. We're kind of going to sort of have to give up a little bit. I mean, we will continue to play these cards and try to raise the colonial penetration and Hajez, because we never know, you know. My arithmetic in the last video was that with two unexplored tiles that are part of Hejaz, they comprise also Hejaz, that we simply wouldn't be able to get the colonial penetration, that we don't have the means to get the colonial penetration of Hejaz to bring it into formal colonial status. But my arithmetic might be wrong there, so to that end we are going to still play colonial cards on Hejaz. Just we're not going to play any this turn. We do have quite a lot of private capital accumulated. We've got a lot of manufactured goods and steel. Now, one manufactory that we are looking at is mechanical parts. The reason being is mechanical parts are now continuously required for mine upgrades, increasing our mines. We don't import any. We already have mechanical parts shops, but we're still running at a loss. And we have a technology in the Academy of Sciences, which is hard rock mining. Now that should provide, I think that provides, I'm going to be wrong actually, I'm looking at the wrong thing, that's why. I might be wrong here. That might just give us a generic kind of boost to our mines, but it might also give us the facility to upgrade them further. But in any case, most mines, or a lot of mines, nearly half of our mines have not been upgraded, so they're still kind of manually, you know, it's manual mining. Our coal mines are all mechanical mines now. They use mechanical parts and this kind of thing, small locomotives, and as such, and also some of our iron mines, we require a constant flow of mechanical parts, which in turn requires steel and coal and so on. So we have got an economy that is now, in order to get the raw materials necessary to sustain the industrial plant, this itself now requires a significant amount of industrial plant because of the mechanization of resource extraction. So to that end, we're going to look at Sofia, I think, for a mechanical parts shop. Has that played? Yeah, it has. That's good. We've still got 2,000 private capitals. There's still some options here. What have we got in Salonika or Salonik? We've got a mechanical parts shop, military gear, ammunition in Ankara. Diamond mines are all upgraded. There's no agriculture really. It's just manufacturing. I'm thinking maybe a steel plant. I mean, a steel production is pretty good, but he says it's running at a loss. That's because how much steel do we expend building that? So we expend 27 years of steel. We're not importing steel, it would appear. So yeah, 10 units per turn from North Germany. So yeah, I think another steel furnace is on the order of the day. Let's keep a little bit of an eye on. I'm sort of looking at a bit of a kind of Middle Eastern pet projects. Baghdad is one. The other is Damascus. I think we're going to build a steel furnace in Damascus. It's a level 3 city. Yeah, let's do that. That still leaves us with enough private capital, comfortably in fact, to meet the operational costs of our economy. Our operational costs currently run at 911. It is a lot. It is a lot. It's a big economy that we're getting now. It's a big industrial base that requires a lot of capital each turn. Okay, that's good. So there's a couple of manufactories that we're laying down. It will take some time, of course. Because the amount of manufactured goods that we expended, we're going to reduce a little bit the amount of manufactured goods that we're making available. Of course, we wouldn't have sold any of those anyway, but just in case we did, we don't want to leave any shortages on the domestic market. Yeah, really good round economically. We'll start shifting a lot of agricultural produce. There's a bit of stagnation in kind of agricultural exports. But we're starting to shift some, sure enough. I mean, that's like 25 units of cereals. How many units of cereals do we make? I mean, a lot. Yeah, 76. The consumption is... yeah, 205. Plus conversion. No, 25, yeah, 25 units conversion. We've got a fairly robust agricultural economy at large. We kind of secured that early on. But yeah, the economy's looking good, really good. No other real developments on the international front to report. The only other thing is that France, you remember in the last video, France and Spain had a crisis, a diplomatic crisis, I think over Morocco, which Spain won. Now that crisis did result in open conflict, which is interesting. What we want to really do is we don't really want France to secure borderlands of Spain because it's kind of ahistorical. They don't really have claims in those regions. As such, we want to... The problem is I want to kind of keep the options open to allow Austria to offer us territory for a peace deal. But then again, I mean, it's not beyond the realms of possibility that France would secure kind of territory in Spain. But my hope is that they would just simply make kind of colonial demands. But this conflict, the catalyst for this conflict was the diplomatic crisis that Spain and France had. So I'd imagine the resolution of this conflict would be the resolution of that crisis, which is to say that Morocco would kind of... I mean, I think it's going to be a French win fairly comfortably, I would have thought. Spain is in a deep state of kind of decay by this period, well, as are we on paper, but of course we're not. Anyway, that's it. It's early December. Administration is set for the turn. Colonial cards played. Industrial plant laid. and military moves conducted. So we'll put you on pause and we'll see you on the other side in late December. Okay, welcome back. It is late December, and yeah, it's the end of the year. It's a good round. I mean, there was some fairly intense kind of action, but nothing kind of, it's fairly inconclusive, which really, given the situation we were in only 4 weeks ago, inconclusive is good. First action then is really the continued action on the west bank of the Danube. The Austrians still have significant forces in theatre, but Ahmed Pasha is getting replacements up, he's getting good access to supply, and he's inflicting defeat again and again. This time, I mean, we only inflict 32,000 casualties, take 25,000, so it's not like, you know, we inflict many more casualties. It's just that Austrian forces, their regiments are very under strength. We take 9,000 prisoners, so the Austrian position on the west bank of the Danube in Hungary is just beginning to atrophy. They still have significant forces, but it's just not enough, and they've committed those forces, they've kept them in place, and that position is now beginning to kind of wither. I mean, what they have left is almost nothing. Some forces have pulled back. These are very under-strength forces have pulled back north to Presburg, so they actually are now evacuating the position. They still have very small mixed forces. These are like supply units and brigade-sized forces. This is nothing. It's chicken feed. So we've pretty much secured the west bank of the Danube. And we've got supplies now in West Budapest and in Vienna, and the First Army is now supplied. We have lines of communication secured, and I honestly think that's it. That's like pennies in their eyes kind of thing. I can't see. I mean, the Austrians had a window, a narrow window, to try and press a counteroffensive against Vienna or completely isolate our force in Vienna, and it's late December. I can't see. I mean, now their forces are going to start becoming weaker and weaker. We could even see forces that have not been committed to battle where they are under strength. So Austrian forces, I think, are now just going to begin to kind of atrophy. They're going to begin to wilt because they don't have any kind of central political authority. We've secured the political and kind of economic heartland of the empire once again, and yeah, new skin for the old ceremony. You know, it's like tried and tested kind of method that's worked with the Austrians, and each time it feels easier as they become weaker with each passing kind of every decade. I mean, it's been 2 decades, but I mean, this would have seemed unthinkable, you know, 10 years ago. And we've now done it, you know, in the last 10 years. I mean, the 1860s, we've been at war continuously with Austria, in truth, punctuated by periods of peace, as opposed to the other way around. And the last war was a brief war, the Summer War of '68. We secured Montenegro. They this war, I mean, we're going to be looking to secure more. They have offered us peace. They're offering us one tile again, which is Dalmatia. I think we're going to push it this time. I am apprehensive. When I look at our foreign relations, they are declining. I mean, our foreign relations 5 years ago were at like 17 with Britain, about 10 with France. So this is going to be putting a lot of pressure on any kind of goodwill that we have. Bear in mind that these two powers are really the only other great powers that had any kind of sympathetic view to the Ottoman Empire, and their position now is mostly neutral, really. You know, they hold a neutral position. So the only other great powers hold a neutral position. We've got no other great powers that are really sympathetic, and a host of great powers that look at us, you know, with some degree of enmity. Russia, Prussia, obviously, we're giving their southern ally a hiding once again, and of course Austria, we're at war with them. So yeah, we are kind of testing the boundaries of what is kind of permissible during the period diplomatically. We're conducting an offensive war this time. We're not just defending ourselves. That does have bigger political kind of implications. But we're going to press ahead. We're going to press ahead. We're going to try and hold our nerve this time. In the short term, I mean, our movement west is just going to try and maintain its position. We're going to get Hussein Avni out of Croatia, I think, to Slavonian. It's a 3-day march. That's good. We're going to separate one of the army corps. That's 6 days. We're going to set that to evade combat, and we're going to get that army corps in structure in Slavonian. And we'll set Hussein Avni to hold a defensive posture at all costs. That secures the kind of the bank of the Drava, so the Austrians can't then move into Bosnia and cause any kind of problems with supplies and logistics. It also means that Hussein Avni then also provides support to the 5th Army. The 5th Army has lost some elements. I think it lost its HQ service asset unit, so it is still under pressure. It's sustaining losses, and it's, you know, I mean, the logistics system that we have, the railroads, is mostly devoted to bringing supplies up. We will obviously be trying to bring replacements up, I suppose. We don't have any control over that. But we do have ample replacements. We've got a fairly large, that's the wrong shortcut. Yeah, we've got a large kind of strategic reserve, so it'll take a bit of time for those kind of replacements to trickle up. They've got to come a long way. It is on railroads, but the key thing is going to be securing, it's just securing our lines of communication. With Western Hungary cleared out, that's going to be a much easier kind of business. So that's what we're going to do at Army Group West. In terms of the east, the northern or the right wing, which is the more passive wing, we're going to hold our position, hold on a defensive posture, defend at all costs. The lion's share of the Austrian forces are to the kind of north now of this position. They're in Russia and in kind of Bukovina. The left wing, which is the force that we're going to press into Hungary, we're now going to begin to conduct that offensive. So first of all, the Third Army will set an offensive posture, and we're going to make an assault into Grosswarden. There are Austrian forces there. It's one army corps and what looks like a brigade and some supply service asset units. They're under strength now, and yeah, we're going to kind of secure the north bank of the Koros. 7th Army is going to conduct an offensive across the Koros and look to secure Sombor. Sombor used to be fortified, I think, in the 1850s, but we destroyed the fortress and they never rebuilt it. And that brings us then very, very close, really. Well, we're already there. I mean, once we're in Sombor, we're the kind of north of the Danube, and we would then be in a position to secure the east bank of the Danube and to provide support for the centre. So the Eastern Offensive begins in late December, and the idea is if we can have this wrapped up by kind of February, March, that puts us in a really, really good position for a kind of summer campaign to really kind of deliver the coup de grace against the Austrian Empire. My thinking is they're now going to really struggle. They're going to struggle to recover from this situation. They had a window. Once again, it's a closing window. A lot of their forces in the Italian peninsula. I suspect that's where much of their leadership is. They just weren't able to bring them back for whatever reason. So that's it. It feels almost like the kind of campaign is over. Touch wood. I can't see them recovering from this situation. It doesn't mean that operations cease. We want to really, now that their boots on their throat, this is not the moment to kind of let up. We push hard. We secure victory locations. This gives us much more elbow room. And they will offer us more as well on the peace conference table. They're going to be, as they become increasingly desperate, and because we have significant territorial claims, it's likely that they're going to open the books in terms of what they're prepared to offer us. That's my theory anyway. If not, we'll have diplomats. At the turn of the year, we get 2 diplomats. That gives us a bit of kind of, gives us options to really start kind of laying down some demands. So that's going to be it. That's operations planned for the next year. Economic administration has been set. The next term then will begin in early January 1870, the beginning of the second decade of the campaign. So I'll leave it here. The only operations then is securing Slavonian and then beginning the offensive then from Transylvania into eastern Hungary. So next video will pick up in January 1870. Thanks for watching this video, and I'll see you in the next one.